Hello, Ed. Welcome from hot London. You're doing well to not show the sweat beads coming down your face.
Yeah, I know this is all camera crew. You can't see it. I'm good, mate. Yeah. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good, thanks. Excited to chat today. For those that don't know, I guess you are a Claude ambassador for London, which is pretty cool. And so I thought I'd pick your brains on sort of what you're seeing with the latest with Claude, both in terms of what's been announced over the past few weeks, but also you've put in an enormous amount of effort to writing a guide on how to secure Claude Cowork and kind of pull some insights into that. We probably can't cover the whole of it today, but we can kind of do some of the highlights of that. So yeah, do you want to say hello and maybe talk a little bit about what you're doing in terms of being a Claude ambassador, and if people are on the line expecting stuff from London, what might they be expecting over the coming months?
Yeah, sure thing. So, I mean, bread and butter eyes, I'm a practitioner at heart. I run the security team here at Harmonic. That means I need to be very close to the shenanigans with AI. Recently, I applied and was successful to join the Anthropic Community Ambassador Program. So there's a bunch of ambassadors around the globe. Some represent entire cities, other represent specific verticals. And so I'm a representative in London for cybersecurity. There are only 3 other cybersecurity ambassadors in the world. So privileged to be part of a team of people who are working closely with Anthropic, learning about what's coming with Claude, bringing people the power of Claude. And the whole idea is that we'll run multiple meetups in London, which get people time to have hands on the tool, share their experiences with Claude, and basically bring people together. I think, AI is changing how we as security practitioners do work, not just the work we need to do. And I think getting people in a room to kind of talk about that, but also put it into practice is really important. It's quite hard to keep up right now. It's quite hard to learn what the right thing to do is or not. And that's the whole point of the ambassadorship that I'm doing is I'll bring those people to the room. We'll give you a bunch of Claude credits and we'll get your hands on tools. So not only can you learn how to use Claude to be better at your job, but also find the wins in there that you can go and help to secure the organizations or systems that you're part of.
Nice. I love the idea that events now, instead of like learning credits to go towards a certification, you just get money to spend on AI. I think that's a way better model than getting some ridiculous.
I think you just give people the tools and you say go, and you just see what happens. And I think that's really important that we do more of that.
Love it. Cool. So in terms of today, probably spend like 30-ish minutes. And if people are on the line, here's what to expect. So we're going to go for some top tips. So here, what are the 5 things that if you're looking at Claude and Cowork, what do you need to concentrate on? What are the gaps in the security side of things that you need to overcome to deploy that securely? We've got a bunch of free tools. So I want people to go away from these sessions actually with some free stuff that they can crack on and do something with, like tomorrow or even today. So we'll talk about those. And then we'll finish by talking about like, who are Harmonic Security? What exactly do we do? We love talking about this kind of stuff, but what does our solution and how does it help in this space? So that's when I'll be chopped enough talking about that. So we'll kick off probably just digging into what's new. So this is like, it's almost a full-time job of working out what Claude and Anthropic are releasing on a week-to-week basis. And so I thought it'd be nice to kick off with, in the past 4 weeks, what are the highlights that's been released? So it's quite tiring to keep up with this, but here's 3 things that'd be good to chat about. What stands out to you, Ed? What is most helpful? Where do you think a lot of concentration needs to be?
Yeah, I think there's so much more as well that's like not listed here, which I think massively doesn't impact security, but it kind of gives you the sense of where Anthropic are going and where Claude, the product, is going. So yeah, I mean, if people are not aware of it, kind of MCP is a protocol which allows an LLM, an AI model, to gain access to tools and systems so it can perform tasks. A basic ML model doesn't have anything like that. It's some data set that's trained and it gives you ability to interface with that data in a way. So MCP allows it access to those tools. Previously, before, in order to connect things, you have to use their connectors tab, or you have to have local MCP stuff running and kind of kind of quite developer heavy, but all kind of like public SaaS sort of stuff. Well, MCP tunnels means that you can now route some of that traffic to your privately hosted MCP servers or the MCP servers that you may have in a different area, and it gives a kind of logical link between someone using Claude on their desktop to some infrastructure you might be hosting somewhere else to give them that MCP connection. So it just expands two things. One is expands where you may be able to deploy your MCP servers and better serve that to the business. Massive pros there, because you can probably do it in a more secure, compliant manner that reduces the amount of MCP sprawl that's there. But again, it's more infrastructure that you have to manage in order just to kind of get this AI thing going, which comes with its own trade-offs.
So this obviously written here, it's in research preview, there's early access, there's like different forms of releases. If you were to be giving advice to somebody that's like, right, you're getting these things coming at you, right? You can choose to turn them on or not. It's tempting probably just to like hold off doing that until you really work out what's going on. What's the process for actually getting that deployed in the enterprise? Would you select a small group of people to kind of test it with? Can you roll it out for some people but not others? Like, how do you even navigate that when you've got so many things coming in different research previews and you don't really know what to spend your time?
And in reality, research preview just means that it's pretty much public, but they probably are holding back on a few things or reserve the right to change it or pull it or whatever it might be. So with all due respect, research preview isn't really a preview when near on most people have it. Let's talk about getting it out to your organization. I think the first thing is you don't actually need to jump on everything that comes out in any type of preview. MCP tunnels is a really good example where if you don't have a fundamental understanding on MCP and the traditional way in which people connect their Claude to MCP servers or connectors as they call them, then looking and diving into tunnels is not going to help you. In fact, it will probably muddy the water and confuse you a little bit. But typically, yes, you want to identify use cases in your organization where you think an MCP tunnel may provide benefit, both from a security point of view and maybe champion that that's a better way of managing access to some private applications for your LLM to do stuff with, and deploying that in a way that uses their custom roles and some of their RBAC functionality to only allow certain people to access connectors that are being routed kind of through the tunnel. They've recently, not within the last 4 weeks, but definitely within the last 8 maybe, pulling numbers out my arse, but fairly recently they released a better way of managing role-based access control in Claude. So you have a little bit more freedom now in terms of what features can be turned on by who and who can access them in your organization. And again, like most things in research preview, you probably want to understand those capabilities more than you do some of the new stuff coming out.
Got it. So I know when we chatted a few months back, it felt like Anthropic were a little bit behind on that being enterprise ready, particularly behind OpenAI, who had a few more of those features, but it still felt more exciting going with Claude. It feels like they're catching up a little bit in terms of being enterprise ready and having those controls, configurations that make those kind of things possible.
Yeah,
on that
I think
note,
so. Sorry, go on.
The Okta. No. I was trying to do a segue into the second bullet, which was on the Okta managed MCP connectors, and that being another good example of how to kind of bring this into the enterprise security tooling you may already have.
Yeah, I mean, so big partnerships in these spaces, I think, will drive Anthropic to do the right thing with Claude. What we are seeing is that, yes, they're bringing better features to the enterprise tier for Claude, but they're still very much only doing what I would consider as a practitioner the bare minimum, like what they have to do in order to make this a enterprise sellable solution so that they can scale this through their own go-to-market channels. So things like the Okta stuff are now bringing a better understanding on identity and access to systems through Claude, which previously was a little bit unknown and a little bit more kind of like a Wild West level of getting to control. Partnering with people at Okta who understand identity in a better space, understand access to systems and how that should work is a far more cohesive relationship than then going to go build that themselves. Of course, being backed by a bunch of customers that have Okta means that the rate of adoption would be faster and easier to understand.
Yeah. All right, last one came out yesterday. Claude Tag. I've not had a chance to play around with it myself. Any early takes on that? I feel I'm excited to use it, even really without knowing what it does.
Yeah, early takes are, I think, it heavily relies on what a developer culture is, but quite frankly, it means that you can be chatting away in Slack about a feature that you're working on or a bit of code that's being written or developed in your organization, and you can chat between a couple of engineers. Oh, there's this bug. I've seen this feature. Can you implement X, Y, Z? And you can quite literally tag Claude in the thread and say, oh, based on this thing, can you go and build this? Can you go and fix the bug? And Claude merrily goes along and does its thing. And now with most of the cool features that come out for kind of Claude Code and in the integrations with Slack, they're heavily backed by you being a GitHub user or a GitHub Enterprise user. So again, there's a level of barrier to entry or technical integrations you need first. But it really brings a couple of things to light. One is there's probably another risk pane now, which is like if you're just literally tagging an agent to go and do a thing based on a conversation in Slack, well, your kind of SDLC moves, not just from the engineer writing code on a laptop in an IDE, but now to conversations happening asynchronously in Slack. And also, it muddies the water a little bit between that kind of agent ownership and responsibility model between, okay, well, who's actually responsible for that code that's been written? And if that's written insecurely or introduces a bug or a security problem, like who's at fault is the wrong way of talking about it, but where is the initiator of that coming from? Is that the engineer that did the tagging? Is that Claude itself's own implementation that would be needing more control? So I think really new area, really new space that we need to understand a little bit more about how that works in the kind of SDLC.
All right, love it. Let's move on. So we'll share this kind of as part of the recording, but Ed has written a blog on securing Cowork and all the kind of things you need to look out for. That's a very in-depth piece, so you can kind of think of it as like reference material. I wanted you to pull out the 5 highlights. If you had to focus on just 5 things, what would it be if you're trying to roll this out securely? So I thought we can kind of talk through each of these for a few minutes and just pull out a few things that people should be focused on. So number 1, there's not a compliance API for Cowork. Is probably the highlight there, which has been a blocker for people for a large while and was probably the first thing that came out. What do you recommend to people that are coming into this challenge?
Yeah, exactly. So firstly, there may not be a compliance API, but there is a level of coverage. It's through something called OTel or Open Telemetry, which is a pretty industry standard way of monitoring your applications. So the first thing I would do is do understand like what level of infrastructure or services are in place that allow you to engulf some of that information. Lots of the top security tooling like Seams do allow routing in Open Telemetry data into them. So being able to look at what options you have. The compliance API will cover the chat functionality of Claude, but Cowork needs to go through the OTel route. So firstly, it's like get a good understanding about where can you get that data in, and do you need to deploy something in your organization so you can engulf that information. One of the brilliant things about Claude and Claude Code specifically is you can just prompt this and probably get a little local proof of concept working really quickly, and the route to having this available to you is a lot easier these days. But yeah, I think you need to know that the visibility is 0 unless you deploy this OTel stuff. Otherwise, you won't be able to see the prompts, the tool calls, some of the usage information that Cowork really drives.
And quite nice. And for people interested in token spend, I believe there's some information around that via OTel as well.
All token spend, which model was used, the literal dollars being used, how big the task was. I think there's a lot of usage information and cost you can explore through OTel. Yeah,
big fat 0 next to Fable at the moment, unfortunately.
Exactly. Yeah.
We'll see. Cool. All right. Number 2, let's talk about Dispatch.
So Dispatch.
I don't use Dispatch, so I'm quite keen to learn more.
So Dispatch is a great functionality, and I'm going to talk about Dispatch and computer use in the kind of similar term here. So Anthropic are moving into a world where you can control Claude from every pane. So you can control it from your mobile phone, from the browser, but also from the desktop app. Dispatch allows you to send tasks from the app on your mobile phone that your desktop can complete. So imagine you leave your desktop running on your desk with the lid open, and you want to construct Cowork to go and do a thing that references files on your laptop or connectors. Well, you can trigger that from 6 a.m. in the morning on the treadmill or in your Uber ride or your commute to work, whatever it might be. You can trigger that from your phone, and it will go and kind of run that task queue at the on your laptop at another end. Yes, it relies on your laptop being on and present for that to happen. Pretty risky thing to have. You can toggle it on or off. It's actually not available in the enterprise plans, but it is available in Teams and the personal plan. So Pro Max it is available for as well. They took this one step further. So dispatch is a way to send your task to the machine to do it. They also released something called computer use, which then gives the same functionality, but Claude can now control your keyboard and mouse. So it's not just about like what can the sandbox access, what files in the file system can it see. It can now click around your computer, open applications, type things in on the keyboard, and it really just bridges that gap between a mobile and an enterprise device being able to agentically take actions.
So how on earth, if this requires the laptop being open, would you navigate that in sort of a needing to be compliant perspective?
Yeah, I mean, so quite frankly, if you're running MDM tooling, so like Kanji or Uru as it's now called for Windows, or Intune for Mac OS, those policies take precedent. It's essentially what happens in the background on Mac OS. It uses something called Caffeinate, which is a typical command line tool that keeps your Mac OS awake. Those don't override the system managed tooling through MDM services, so it actually won't work. We've tested it and we've tried it, and we've had people try to use dispatch, and our MDM tooling still locks the device after the compliant period of time. But what that does mean is you need to be really hot on whether that is working in your organization or whether people are doing other things to kind of circumvent that, i.e. are they logging into Cowork using your company credentials on a personal device and doing all this sort of stuff. These are the type of controls that go broader than just does it shut down after 20 minutes. Where is the attack surface expanding to?
Great. So we talk about shadow AI a lot. If we're going to have shadow hardware as a result of AI coming in, it's going to be
all the Mac Minis that everyone bought for OpenClaw, like, is a prime example of that, right? Unmanaged devices using unmanaged agents, probably doing things in your organization.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Terrifying, and probably one to not enable as an enterprise. One that you probably can't avoid enabling, connectors. Lots of hornets' nests and things here that we get to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So we spoke about MCP. The underlying technology of connectors is MCP, as well as, web search is not quite a connector, but it's a functionality in Claude that gives you access to websites and stuff. So again, like with dispatch, we'll talk about that interchangeably. Mentioned already, an LLM can't do anything unless it has access to tools. Connectors is what gives that. So firstly, if you task Claude to go and do a thing, it can have the ability to go and search the web. It can go and run Google searches. It can look for blog posts. It can pull that into its context to better serve you for the task that you've given it. And that really depends on like what settings you've got up. You can control your egress stuff, so you can block internet access. You can set it to only allow access to certain domains, or you can give it full unfettered access to the internet. And that really depends on your risk position. But arguably, with most of these things, if you put a hard block in place, people will figure out a way around it. So that's web search. Typically, connectors, similar way, you can control what connectors are allowed to run in your organization, whether that's a browser-based one or a desktop-based one. You can actually control a level of interactions at the individual tool level. So are people allowed to have certain tools be always allowed to run? Should they always be prompted to allow it to run? So as a security practitioner, when it comes to how you're giving an LLM the ability to do things, understand how it gains access to the internet and how we protect against things like prompt injection and only allowing access to certain known trusted domains. But also from a connector standpoint, using the RBAC tooling within the kind of custom roles features within Claude, give the relevant teams access to the relevant tooling. Some power users may need more open access restrictions to what the tools can do. Others need to be able to be proved for allowing access to certain tools via request. A really good rule of thumb is if it's a read tool, always tends to be fine and safe. But if it's a write tool or a destructive access, write, delete, whatever it might be, you may want to enforce that is always being requested rather than running autonomously.
All right. Talking of autonomously running, scheduled tasks.
So scheduled tasks is the first kind of iteration. It came out in March. It's a little bit old now, but it was kind of their first iteration about can we spin up agents relatively autonomously to complete a task without a user needing to be there. Like with most things, it needs your computer to be awake and online. But quite frankly, you can set up a scheduled task. It runs like a cron job. Run this every Monday at 6 a.m. Run this every day at 2 p.m. And it will run a prompt for you. It can use your connectors. It can use your skills that run in Claude and just do that on your behalf. I use this every day, every morning. I open my laptop. I have a task that runs at 6 a.m., which does an AI news briefing, and it sends it to me in Slack. So the moment I'm working away, having my morning coffee, getting ready for the day, about 5 minutes in, I'll get a notification in Slack from Claude that says, here's your AI news briefing. It gives me a full breakdown of all the AI news and Claude releases that have happened within the last 24 to 48 hours. You can turn this on or off. You can allow scheduled tasks to run or not. You can allow scheduled tasks to have always allow on the MCP tools that they can access, or again, you can restrict that. So typically when you run a scheduled task, a tool request might pop up and it says, oh, you can only allow this to always run on scheduled tasks, which means if you're a user doing a prompt, you still have the level of control you need. Key things to think about here are what scheduled tasks are people doing? What type of prompts are people putting into those? Are people leaving their laptop on overnight just so the scheduled tasks will run? These are the key kind of attack planes that we need to start considering when with scheduled tasks. But a big step in the right direction when it comes to giving the power of AI to people who have a lot on, getting autonomous stuff done on a regular schedule.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think of a scheduled task, it's quite like a boring piece of terminology, but actually that's just like lots of little agents going off and doing stuff, and it's not. And the way we're talking about it as an industry is like, you need to assign an identity to each agent that you've got. And it just kind of doesn't really make sense in this model when you're thinking about how many scheduled tasks you got flying around.
Right, and if you're an engineer, it's no different to them writing a cron job locally on their machine. Like that's been an age-old technology for the last 10, 20 years. That's not gone anywhere, and people don't really raise a hoo-ha about that. Scheduled task is just that, but because it's within an agent, in a sandbox, it's a little bit autonomous, it comes with a little bit more risk. But I think the enablement opportunities here far outweigh some of the risks, in my own personal opinion. We're all running at a high level of risk here. We have to be comfortable with that. Scheduled tasks is a prime example of a time to show that.
All right, perfect. And then the final of the top 5 controls we think we need to enable for deploying Claude is all about the Chrome extension.
Yeah, absolutely. Claude can control your browser. It can do that by spinning up a group of tabs and then interacting with those tabs. So you can say, oh, can you go and find the top 5 people from this company and connect with them on LinkedIn? And it opens the tab, it scrolls, it enters text into the search bar, it clicks the connect button for you, all those sorts of things like that. So it's good. It gives access to the browser, again, more autonomous ability to do things. However, access to websites comes with a massive risk for indirect prompt injection. Is Claude going to connect to a website that has some level of hidden instruction somewhere that the agent will read? What you may see put in front of you is not what the agent sees. The agent sees the actual code, that's the HTML that's running that page, not just a pretty thing that you see. So indirect prompt injection becomes a massive risk here. Key things to consider here is you can do 3 things in your org. One, you can set it so what the default action for Claude Chrome is. Is it default allowed or is it default blocked? And if it is default allowed, what domains is this allowed to run on? Likewise, if it's default blocked, what's the opposite? What's the allow list? So choose your risk position. Are you open, or are you blocked and controlled, or are you completely shut off? They're the kind of 3 options that you have.
It feels like a minefield to me in terms of, what possibly could be discussed across Reddit threads, even LinkedIn. Like, could there be some hidden indirect prompt injection in some of those? Possibly, but to your point, there's a risk decision that you just need to make.
Anthropic called out that 1% of the stuff they see is prompt injection. Now, 1% seems small. Out of the traffic that Anthropic sees, it's astronomically huge, but it's still not 100%, and it's still something that we need to be aware of, but I don't think we need to put the fire out on it just yet.
Awesome. I hear some big concerns from your fans around the Chrome extension in the background. So yeah, it's an animated there. All right, quickly before we get on to kind of how Harmonic helps. So we got 3 tools. The first one is a tool that you have released. So this is a popular one called Claude.ai. Do you want to briefly talk about what this does for folks that want to access it?
Yeah, it's a simple one-liner script that you can run locally or deploy through, MDM or kind of remote access tooling that does a full cataloging and audit of the configuration and data within your Claude setup. So it can look at the skills you have, whether scheduled tasks or dispatch is enabled, what MCP connections you have available to you, how many accounts you're logged into. It gives you a really clear understanding in one view what the risk position is and works across a user running it locally, you running it via the terminal, or also spitting the data out into something like a seam. There are a bunch of options for you to do that.
Awesome. Very, very popular. I think got hundreds of stars that people like doing. So please check that out after this webinar. Item number 2, once you have those skills, please check out skillscan.io. So that's the Harmonic maintained website that does a static analysis of those skills. So you can bulk upload them, and it will identify things like prompt injection and other risky parts of the skills. So what's quite nice about this is that it does it kind of all locally in the browser. So none of your skills get kind of pulled in to us. It just all runs in there. So no concerns about that. Anything to add to that one, Ed?
I think this is a really upcoming area. I think skills are really important that you understand them. I think the industry is still trying to understand what a risky skill might look like. But if you get a chance to audit your skills, starting here is a really important first step.
Cool. And then the final one, talked about this at the very beginning, but this is the guide. So it goes into an extraordinary amount of detail in all of the different settings and all the things you need to look for and concentrate on, which is a good reference material that we try to keep fairly updated, kind of every week, every month, and make sure it's got the latest.
I'd say at least every month we're coming out with a decent update. But I think the key thing here for people to know is that if they're at a loss with how doing this stuff relates to compliance, I think we're mapping it back to ISO 27001. We're mapping it back to the the NIST AI risk management framework. So if you need a bit of structure into why some of these settings and how they impact your compliance posture, this is a really good guide, if I don't say so myself.
Indeed. Okay, thanks, Ed. That was really, really helpful. It's impossible to cover the entirety of that in just one webinar, but hopefully if people have questions, they can kind of follow up afterwards or answer those in the chat. Why are we talking about this as a company? So we try to be as helpful as we can with this content because we genuinely believe that this needs to be adopted, and there are a bunch of gotchas that you need to get around. Some of those can be solved with technology, like Harmonic. Some of those cannot. And so we want to help out across all of those different areas. The areas where we can help is probably where I'll talk about next. And that is the extent of the Harmonic Security coverage now. And we continue to add a bunch of stuff as time goes on. So firstly, if you look at if I'm trying to summarize the various different challenges with people deploying Claude, these 6 things tend to come up on probably every call that we have with customers and prospects. So it's whether it's people using Claude that's in the wrong tier. Say, Ed, you've been talking about things that are on different plans, dispatches on this. It's quite hard to have the controls over what people are actually using. So people have that pretty valid concern. You've still got that concern with sensitive data being exposed to those personal accounts in the browser. But then there's additional things on top of that. So you've got the agents, you've got the skills, you've got the MCP supply chain, indirect prompt injection. And then finally, it's like the lack of audit trail. You don't actually know what's going on. So it's a really interesting mix of security teams are being told they have to deploy Claude because it's so appealing. And yet there are still these glaring areas that we think we can help with and give you a bit of a head start alongside the guidance that we went through today. It's annoyingly complex to have a comprehensive view of Claude use in your enterprise, though. So if you look at like where employees might be using Claude, there's a lot of different areas. So it could be on your mobile, the desktop, the command line. It could be in Codex, Cowork, it could be in the browser. And all of those have different ways you need to collect from them. And so we're closely following as they release to make sure that we've got really comprehensive view, and then we can deploy that really, really easily for our customers. So that basically means we have a browser extension. That's where Harmonic started. We have a very, very feature-rich browser extension that can collect a lot of prompt data and have loads of controls within there. And that's really helpful. You've got the compliance API connector, a local MCP gateway, and we can connect your hotel as well for that prompt level visibility, particularly into Codex and Cowork. What do we then do? Like, how does that help? And I like to separate this into the web-based activities you've got, and then the desktop-based activities. And then you've got the things that kind of cut across all of it. So first, in terms of the web, we're looking at full prompt login, and you can have a full audit log of all the prompts going to Claude.ai across all the different app plans. So you can kind of see what people are using from personal accounts, etc. And you can get full visibility into what tasks and use cases people are using, whether that's personal accounts or the enterprise tools for Claude. On top of that, we can then apply our inline controls. That's what we're really, really good at, whether that is sensitive data detection, prompt injection, that inline classification I'll do a quick demo of after this slide or next slide. We've got the Usage Explorer, which is really, really powerful, which is for the browser and also for mobile use that we're able to identify as well. So you can identify for each department group, what are they actually using Claude for, which is definitely a pertinent question at the moment with people concerned about token use. It's like, great, what are people actually using this for? Can I get some analysis into that? And then finally, from like an audit perspective, really, really powerful to have the full prompt and response data that you can have that content analysis via a webhook there to get that audit logs and traceability. So that's kind of what we got on the web-based activities. Obviously, as Ed has highlighted here, loads going on the desktop as well. So we have a local MCP gateway for people using local MCP servers. We can also have remote MCP servers in there. We have our own endpoint agent that helps to identify API traffic as well, but also activities in Claude Desktop and having some controls around there. And then finally, a remote MCP gateway, which helps with those remote connectors and having some controls over there. All the stuff that we highlighted today, so whether that is you've got Okta to help authenticate to the right approved connectors, that is all legit. That is still a thing that you want. We're just taking it to the next level. So once you've got the right authentication, what happens during that session, or what happens with personal accounts that aren't going through that? We have full control over actually what is happening at the point of the interaction itself. And then cutting across all of those, whether it's on the desktop, whether it's web-based, it is our own suite of small language models that help to actually understand the intent of every AI interaction that's happening. So that's the one slider on Harmonic and what we're doing to help with Claude. It's not just Claude, of course, but looking to cover other tools as well, and that full workforce use of AI and what's going on there. So that's a good way of understanding how Harmonic helps. I can give you a quick demo as well, so you kind of see some of those inline controls. So here I'm on my personal Claude account. I'm imagining I'm part of some healthcare company here, got some clinical trial data. I'm going to post that in egregiously using Opus 4.8. And what that actually does is it captures the prompt before it ends up going to Anthropic. It will have a nice little modal here displayed to the user, which is fully customizable. So you can have different logos, colors, you can change the text, you can change the options that are displayed to the user. For example, this one, you can ignore the warning and you can prompt the user to put justification before proceeding and going and doing so. So I'll go and submit that. Of course, we capture all of that data. So you're able to see who was using those tools, what data went in, and even that justification text that I put in, you'll be able to access that as well. So if I go into my alerts, you'll be able to see that my intervention was ignored, and here's the justification that I put in order to do that. So, and here's more information about the app plan. You can dig into that and find out more information there. Now, to give you a good idea of, so I mentioned, all the different ways we cover Claude. Here's all the different apps that we're covering. So you can see there's loads of different app plans. There's Claude Mobile. All of those have a different risk appetite, and you might want different controls based on those. So you can actually go in here and see the full coverage that we have. Of course, it's not all about Claude. There's a bunch more that we can be looking at here, whether that is AI APIs, other native apps, whether that's free plans in the browser, DeepSeek and other apps in high-risk geographies. You get the idea. There's more going on than Claude, but even within Claude, there are sort of almost dozens of apps that you might need to be concentrating on. You can go and then set specific policies for these different plans. So you could go and say, for example, for free Claude, I don't want any sensitive data going into there. And that's really easy to do within our platform. Instead of showing all of that, the one thing that's really, really cool is actually to then understand that usage and the patterns there in terms of the tasks and the use cases. So you can go into here and identify the actual trending use cases across, you see native apps here, across mobile. You can go and actually understand what are people doing, and these can actually be clustered based on identification of each of the tasks that we see people doing. So this is a really, really powerful way of understanding what people are actually doing, and then critically, which of these use cases is leading to sensitive data exposure or other types of alerts. So you're able to dig in here and actually see what's going on and understand maybe, right, this is amazing that people are doing all these powerful use cases, but a bunch of sensitive data is going into free Claude. And I need to understand why that is the case and have some better controls, or even redirect people to an approved tool with our controls. So loads going on here. We are probably, from what we've seen, the only people giving this depth of understanding into all of the AI interactions that you're using, both across all of the Claude products, but also all of your AI in general. So this puts you in a position where, great, you can start to make decisions about which tooling you spend or spend less money on, but it also helps to get ahead on the security side. So if you're looking at which tools are approved and which ones you need to approve, having the data to have these conversations with how are people actually using these, and proactively reaching out to end users to say, great, I see you're using DeepSeek to achieve this use case. What is it about DeepSeek that you are having to flock to that instead of some of the approved tooling? And that means it's just a better conversation to have as part of the AI governance committee, or the conversations with your end users, that isn't just guesswork and having to invest in more Copilot licenses because you feel that's the thing. It's actually understanding the data and coming up with some back decisions about your AI program that you can actually have this intelligence around. So that's the Harmonic approach. I'll stop sharing there. Happy to go into more detail for anybody that has any follow-up questions. But yeah, with that, Ed, any final comments before we log off and let people go about their day?
Just brace yourself for whatever happens tomorrow, because it's probably another release, another thing down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. The party don't stop. All right. Thanks, Ed. Thanks for your time. And thanks, everybody, for joining.
See ya.